Hi, I'm David and welcome to Leisure Bit, and today we're going to start with a quick reminder that the prize draw for the Campervan and Caravan goodies closes on Sunday night, and secondly I've got an update for you on camper control. So let's get cracking. So before we get on to camper control, just a quick reminder, as I mentioned, the prize draw closes on Sunday evening. That's the 5th of December 2021 at 23:59. So make sure, if you want to be in a chance to win some campervan or some caravanning goodies, please check the video out and remember to enter. All you need to do is stick #campervan or #caravan in the comments of the video to be in with a chance to win. So let's move on now and talk about camper control. So I've been working in the background. The first thing I've been working on is the main module. Still got quite a bit of work to do there. But basically the main module connects to the control panel display. Apologies, I've pulled the protective cover off there, so it's a little bit creased. This is the one that fits in the front of the van near the control panel. From the master module, some of the things we control are the main power, the auxiliary power. Now the auxiliary power is used where we want to leave something running after the master power has been switched off for maybe 5-10 minutes. Things such as the heating system, so we don't cut the power to the heating system when the element's still hot, because it can cause an issue. So that type of thing where we just need a little bit of time to close off. Another one that we'd run on auxiliary power would be something like the external module, so that when we powered off we might want to close the valves, for example, if we set it up that way. The other thing it controls is the main lights, the awning lights, including on, off and dim, and there's a light sensor on it as well, so that we can determine if it's nighttime or daytime, which, if we configure it up that way, we can determine the brightness of the lights, for example, and make it kind of adapt depending on the environmental conditions. There'll also be a temperature, humidity and carbon dioxide sensor in there, which essentially is measuring air quality, so that you know if you need to let a bit of ventilation in, for example. The master unit connects onto the other units, which let's call them slave units. So things such as the external module, that was the one we looked at last time. This is the one that we demonstrated in the previous video. Again, I'll pop a link in the description below if you want to go back and look at that. And just worth noting, for my particular van, thanks to the feedback received, is I've gone for the smaller valves. So I've gone for the 1/2 inch rather than 3/4 inch ones. But I've just kept this up for testing purposes, and it's got the button control as well. And what I'm planning on doing, I mentioned the button control there for a reason. So the external module is driving the wastewater and the fresh dump valves. It's also got an auxiliary which you can use to turn the tank heaters on and off, so we can control those a little more finitely in from the control panel, as well as an additional spare port for anything else we wish to control there. The master module, just before we kind of move on, also controls whether the gas supply is on or off, and the gas level, the freshwater level, the wastewater level, and all of those type of things, and also the pump. And I had a great bit of feedback about making sure we suppress any kind of surges coming back from the pump, because I think certainly in the CV range, I don't think there's a lot of suppression, if any, in the pump. So just to make sure we don't get kind of back EMF sending spikes all over the place, because it plays havoc with the microprocessors. And I know when I first built the water flow measuring device, I had an issue with that because it was solenoid driven, and the back EMF for the solenoid crashed the microcontroller when it kicked in, because you're getting a huge back EMF on that. So I had to do some work to make sure that was suppressed. So the master module then connects onto the slave modules. And as I mentioned, the first one's the external, which we've looked at. The second one is what I'm calling the entertainment module. Now, the entertainment module is just a small module size, like so. It's an empty box at the moment, but just kind of working through the circuit design on that one. And it connects to, in no particular order, just because they're handy on the top here. The first thing, which I don't know if I've shown you this before, but within this box is a DAB radio module. And what I've done there is I've just converted it so it'll operate on 12 volts rather than 5 volts from the USB. There's an antenna socket and there's a 3.5mm output, and that has a remote control unit so that you can tune in and listen to the radio in the van, and that connects into the soundbar. So that's the first output there. The second output is I've got a little August, perhaps pronounced like that, I'm not quite sure, which is a TV receiver that transmits over Wi-Fi, so you can pick it up on your iPad or iPhone or Android device, and that basically connects into the aerial and then connects to USB power on the bottom there, and that pretty much gives you then free view TV. It doesn't do HD, it just does standard definition, but it gives you then access to, as a secondary device, for example, if Rachel was watching something on the TV and there was something important I wanted to watch, I can watch it on the iPad then, so it just gives that alternate. So that'll actually drive the power to that one as well. In addition to that, there'll be the power to the soundbar, there'll be the power to the aerial amplifier, there'll be the power to the television, and a couple of spares on that. And two additional things. One is kind of bottom level mood lighting and top level mood lighting, with just some additional lighting which a bit change the colour and the brightness and effects and that sort of thing on, that I'm building out from the entertainment module, just so you can set a bit of a mood in the campervan. So with those, you've probably seen a theme there. You think, what the heck's he connecting all of these things into this so-called entertainment module? And the reason is very simple. It's about conserving power when you're off grid. So for example, if I want the TV on without the soundbar, I know I need to put the TV and the aerial amplifier on. If I want to listen to music on the radio in the back, I'll put the DAB module on and I'll put the soundbar on, and so on and so forth. It just allows us to optimize that power and save having things on standby, because that could mean the difference between getting an extra few hours perhaps out of your battery in certain circumstances where there's a high standby drain. And for example, if you set the sleep timer, just switching the standby power off on the aerial amplifier, on the TV, on the soundbar, whatever else you've had on, just when you don't need it to conserve power, and then the ability to switch it on at a different time, which you'd configure via the control panel, and that would instruct the entertainment module on what to do given the circumstances. And remember I mentioned about the switch on the external control module. I'm going to put one of those switches on the entertainment module as well, and then if there is ever a problem with the system, communication, anything like that, you can just press the button to toggle it on and off, nice and simply. So there's a backup in the event of a problem there. But each of those will be individually controllable, configurable and switchable there. So that's the entertainment module. The next module is I've not got a very good name for this one at the moment. I'm just calling it the rear control module at the moment. But it's the one that drives whether the inverter's on or off. So I've got a relay that drives from that connects to the inverter, big 200 amp relay. And then that allows me to turn the inverter on and off quite easily from the panel. And again, you can set up events such as, switch it off after a certain time and so on and so forth. And it can also be used to actually control when it kicks in, kind of with routines. So for example, you don't want the inverter on if you're hooked up. It doesn't make any sense, does it? Or I can't think of a scenario when you would. So we can detect when it's hooked up and make sure that the inverter isn't on, but you can effectively make it flip over when it's unhooked, or, you know, change how it's set up there. So the inverter's the first thing. The second thing is I'll be fitting flow valves, which basically measure the flow of water. So when you run the pump, I'll measure how much water's been used, because it gives a better indication of, one, water consumption, so you get a reasonable measure of how much water's been consumed, but secondly, it also gives a good indication of when the tank's likely to empty. So quite handy as well, working out. I'm not going to bother measuring how much goes into the waste versus how much is consumed. I thought that was maybe overkill, but it's always something that could be added later. And the plan is to try and measure the water going into the tank as well. And then you've pretty much got input versus output equals how much water you've got in the tank, which I think will be a little bit more accurate than the gauges. But that's one we'll have a play around with once we get it in situ and once we get it set up, to work out, you know, does that add any significant value, or is it just extra complexity? The same with the whole of this. It's an experiment to see what are the things that really make a difference and add value and make your life easier, versus the things which are actually sound like a good idea, but actually really pointless doing it because it's all over engineering a solution to a problem that doesn't exist, potentially. So that's the water flow and the inverter there. Also, I'm wanting to make available externally, so I can connect a solenoid or a pump to the water inlet, so I can actually stop it when it's full. Very simple there. So essentially, a solenoid will just block the flow of water. The pump will obviously just stop running. So it's basically a switched 12 volt supply, which cuts off when it's full. As you probably heard when I mentioned about the water fill, it basically saves you making a huge mess and getting water all over the place. Well, that's the theory anyway. So we'll see how we get on with that one. And I think beyond that, various auxiliary ones after that for anything else want to fit. I'm going to fit some USB-C. That's the kind of new standard in USB. So I can charge my laptop up, or charge the GoPro up, or whatever I need to charge up from that, without needing a kind of mains adapter. And I'll probably make that switchable as well. Again, back to the thing of not using any power, or using a very tiny bit of power to power the module control, rather than having everything on standby and cutting the power there. One thing I'm trying not to use, for those of you with electrical knowledge, is wherever possible I'm trying to stay away from electromagnetic switching devices a la relays, because they have a standby power consumption. Now, you heard me mention earlier about the inverter relay. I think that's a different ball game really there, because it's such a huge amount of power to switch. You know, there's a couple of 100 amps potentially flowing through that relay there. So that's kind of non-solid state, although I assume there's probably a way to make it solid state, but I didn't want to get into kind of huge 100 amp switching circuits and that sort of thing, because again, it wasn't overly expensive for the relay, and I thought it made a lot of sense to just stick with something simple like that, then just driving an output switcher relay that then turns the inverter on, and we get a very positive off then when it's off. So that's kind of the plan there. The other thing I'm planning on doing to keep it simple, and when I say to keep it simple, we had a bit of complexity, but it actually simplifies the engineering on the van. Now, I do plan, I think, to fit a couple of extra sockets just to make it a bit easier and more convenient. But what I'm planning on doing is having a changeover relay fitted pretty much off the consumer unit, so that when I'm running on inverter or when I'm running on mains, I can just switch the sockets between the two through a relay. So that if it's kind of powered up through mains, it'll just flip it over to there. If it's running on inverter, flips it the other way, double pole, double toggle. So that's how I'm thinking of doing that, just to save having separate plugs and sockets. Because I think most things that are plugged in, obviously I don't want to power the whole consumer unit because I'm going to start trying to power heating and things like that, and that would be bonkers. So what I'm wanting to actually do is drive the sockets so that the things such as the microwave and anything else plugged into the sockets will work, rather than trying to drive heaters and chargers and that sort of thing, because otherwise you get perpetual charging potentially across it. But it obviously doesn't make sense to drive those things, and want to just drive the relevant bits and pieces there. So that's the kind of control module there. I was also planning on doing one additional one, which is just kind of an auxiliary one for general use, that'll have a couple of light driving outputs so that you can, you know, drive a LED strip, change its colours, dim it, all of that stuff. And also some general purpose on-off outputs. So that was the final module there, but that's kind of a later stage, because at this point in time I've not got a use for it. But it's one of those, it's handy to have the ability to extend to add something in by introducing the extra module that's just a general purpose kind of I/O module. The final bit I forgot to mention actually was in the external module, and it'll probably actually end up putting it in the entertainment module, but it could go in either of them. I'm going to put a temperature monitor for the back, because then you normally, certainly in the CV20, would probably sit in the back of the campervan rather than in the cab area. And as I mentioned earlier, the kind of air quality sensor and that sort of thing I'm planning to put in the front of the van. But at the back there, I think it makes sense to put a temperature sensor, so that when I get onto the bit, and this is going to be the complicated bit, so we'll cover that in another video, of controlling the heating, it essentially then is controlling it based on the temperature where you're sat, rather than the temperature in the front of the van, which I think should lead to a bit more comfort there. Again, just a reminder, this is a bit of an experiment, and if it works out, a few people have asked and said they're interested in you know, how I get on and where we go with it. But the plan is to kind of prototype it, fit it to the van, learn about it, and then if it's good enough, you know, start getting proper printed circuit boards made. And that's the point of time then when it'd be worth a conversation around if anyone was interested in it. At this point, it's a little bit of an experiment to see how we get on, and I would love your feedback on it. So please feel free to comment or drop us a line on it, because really appreciate your feedback. One final thing, a few people have suggested bobbing a camera with where the waste water dump is, so that you don't miss the waste point. And you know, none of us like to do that. I know Rachel and I were in a camp site when we went on the trip with the hired camper van, and it was classic situation. We got to the site, they said, can you be careful where you dump the water, just because a lot of people miss the thing. So Rachel kindly lined us up. So I went out, I pressed the button which had to get out the seat, press it above the door in the Bessacar motorhome that we'd hired, and the water started running out. But of course we were lined up against the wrong drain, and there was quite a distance between the fresh and the wastewater on that one. So we were actually dropping the wastewater nowhere near the actual outlet point. So that was pretty, you couldn't have made it up, especially when they'd said to be careful as well. I mean, most people don't actually mention that, but there we go. Anyway, good lesson learned and great idea. And I think, you know, just a cheapy camera underneath that can feed through on the subject of camera systems, I'll cover that one separate because it's slightly different to the main solution, because you need to feed it into a screen and that sort of thing. And I'm not planning on displaying the image on the control panel screen, because you want that in the cab, don't you? You know, you want to be able to start and stop things from the cab, but you actually want to be able to see what's going on in one of the screens that shows the camera there, rather than on something in the back, because I don't think that would be particularly helpful having it there. So that's where we're up to on that. And I did say I've been working on it, and at this point in time, kind of right in the middle of getting all things connected together. It's been pretty busy at the moment as well, so I've not got quite as far as I hoped. I'm hoping through December and into January get enough time to really get the whole thing pulled together, working, and fingers crossed installed in the van. So just waiting to hear about the van imminently, hopefully. So yeah, that's camper control. Hope you found that update useful, and I look forward to sharing further updates with you, and let's see how we get on with it. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed, and I hope to see you back next time. You take care, and we'll see you out with a little bit of a festive animation.